so I will begin the formal agenda in 1 minute. Okay. Thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Dion Clark Harris. I'm the CARDI representative acting in Jamaica, and I also have been coordinated this project, the pilot program for climate resilience, PPCR for short, that we have been implementing in partnership with the executing agency, the University of the West Indies. I also would like to, at this point, recognize our sponsors, the Inter-American Development Bank, IDB, and the Climate Investment Funds, which provided the well-needed funding to conduct this project. I know I have some of our collaborators from the project management unit with us, and I would like to recognize them as well as the supporting team who you will learn more about as we go forward. So I am the moderator for this first in the webinar series, which will span 5 weeks. And I do hope that everybody on this session this morning will not just be encouraged by what is presented to continue with us for the journey over the 5 weeks, but will also bring on board others to join us as we do what we think is important to help to enhance capacity in becoming climate smart in agriculture. Okay, sorry about that. I just needed to do a little housekeeping before I proceed. So, as you would have probably seen from our promotional information that we sent around, this webinar series will cover a lot of the aspects of climate smart agriculture with the view of just broadening the perspective that persons have as to what this climate smart agriculture is. If you speak to any given person who is involved in any sector, I would want to say, and in agriculture specifically, everybody would have a different slant as to what is climate smart agriculture. What has been our view is that these ideas of what climate smart agriculture is and isn't are sort of narrow and not all encompassing. So this morning, we are going to give you an overview of how we think the best to look at climate smart agriculture and to ensure that you're covering all the bases to meet some of the challenges that are presented by the scenarios of a changing climate in our region. Today, to do that, we have two very competent gentlemen who are in their own right doing something towards climate smart agriculture capacity building in the region, and also in equipping systems for managing the challenges and the opportunities, I should also add, where climate change is concerned. So on behalf of the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, this institute in the partnership is implementing the agriculture component of the PPCR project. I want to welcome you all, and I do hope that at the end of it, you would say you have learned something It has broadened your horizon in terms of how you perceive being appropriately equipped to implement a climate smart project, or to write a proposal towards funding for a climate smart intervention, or just to work within your own institution in making you climate smart, climate resilient. And you would also be able to make your input into the mitigation and adaptation of the region's agriculture towards dealing with our changing climate. Without further ado, I am going to ask, according to the formal agenda, one of our partners, and indeed the implementing partner, executing partner, pardon me, of the PPCR, Ms. Erica Horton. She's a project manager of the PPCR, and I want to welcome her now to give some greetings on behalf of that institution and entity. Ms. Horton.
Thank you, Dion. Thank you. And welcome to all our panelists and participants in this very interesting series that we're hoping to have executed over the coming weeks. We are heartened at the number of participants that have registered, and I hope you remain engaged and invite a friend to invite a friend to invite a friend to join us today, tomorrow, and in the coming weeks. I am Erica Horton, as was introduced, and I am the program manager for the PPCR project executed by the University of the West Indies through the Mona Office for Research and Innovation. The PPCR project is a very ambitious project, having outreach across the Caribbean through 6 countries, a budget of over $10.3 million US, and a very ambitious target executing 7 components. One involving LiDAR data management to improve geospatial data for adaptation planning, sea level rise, and storm surge impact analysis. A component looking at consolidating and expanding the regional climate network and global platform linkages. A component looking at downscaling and expanding climate projection models and high resolution maps. And a component looking at applied adaptation initiatives, under which the CARDI agriculture subcomponent lies. Today, the series that we're starting, the Climate Smart webinar, is one of the key outputs under the CARDI component to consolidate the knowledge that we have in terms of climate smart agriculture, how climate impacts, what can we do to mitigate, what can we do to manipulate climate in our favor so that we have the best outcomes in terms of agriculture. And so we look forward to hearing from all the presenters. Today we have Christian Fleming and Steve Maxime. We look forward to hearing from all of them and learning from all of them how we can be more resilient in terms of our agricultural practices. On behalf of the UA, the Mora Office for Research and Innovation, and by extension, the IDB and the CIF, who are the funders for this activity, I welcome you to this series. And again, do tell a friend to tell a friend as we look forward to sharing the knowledge that we have gathered throughout the project and throughout all our interventions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Horton, and thank you for bringing greetings on behalf of our partners in this initiative. So next on the agenda is my colleague and the Manager of Science, Technology, and Innovation, who resides in CARDI, in Barbados, and he's also the CARDI representative there in Barbados. He's Mr. Ansari Hussain. Mr. Hussain, would you please now bring greetings on behalf of CARDI?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can the host allow me to share my video, please?
Okay, we're doing that at the moment.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I bring you greetings on behalf of CARDI. Over the next 5 weeks, we convene to speak on this urgent matter of climate smart agriculture. And let me state from the outset that CARDI is pleased to be part of this initiative, and we see it as very important and crucial to address at this time. We, of course, thank our partners involved in this program, the IDB, the UA, the CIF. And we have heard it many times before that small island developing states, although among the least responsible for climate change, particularly in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions, we are the most vulnerable to the effects. And therefore, we must be ready and prepared to deal with it. No longer are we to say that climate change will happen or is predicted to happen. It is happening right before our eyes. We are living it. We saw this in 2017 when Maria and Irma, 2 Category 5 hurricanes, hit within a week. We saw it in storm systems that had a rapid intensification, for example, Dorian in 2019. We saw it a few weeks ago in the first hurricane to hit Barbados in 65 years. We see it in prolonged and frequent droughts in several countries in our region regularly. The 2009-2010 drought being the worst in 40 years. There was a notable one in 2015 as well. We see it in heavy rainfall events causing flooding, as that just recently happened in Guyana. We see it in eroded beaches. For example, what is happening in the southwestern peninsula in Trinidad. We saw it in local invasions also in Trinidad. And we see changes in rainfall patterns, increasing temperatures and so on. The IMF in 2018 pointed out that since 1950, 511 disasters worldwide hit small states. Of this 511, 324, 63% was in the Caribbean, killing 250,000 people, affecting more than 24 million through injury and loss of homes and livelihoods. They noted then in 2018 that climate change is expected to compound the problem by making such disasters more frequent and severe, and we are seeing it. And when we speak about livelihoods, the agricultural sector is one of those sectors at the forefront in our countries. And it is usually one of those sectors that is totally wiped out after a disaster. CARDI is part of the regional response mechanism coordinated by CDIMA, which is deployed to affected countries after disasters to conduct these damage assessments. And for far too often, we have to report almost complete devastation after hurricanes and floods in particular. What does this tell us? One thing for certain, for whatever reason, it is that we are not yet resilient. We are not yet where we want to be if we want to survive. And so therefore, the next question is, what do we have to do to prepare? How do we mitigate and adapt? What is it that is required in our toolbox in this battle? These are the sorts of questions which this series of webinars will seek to answer. I must at the same time point out that some of these measures are not necessarily cheap. And to that extent, we must provide the wherewithal to make adoption of the recommended practices much easier. And in this regard, the issue of being able to access finance without exacerbating debt is one of the major challenges which is also needed to be addressed along with the provision of enabling policies. Let me close by reiterating that CARDI stands ready to work together with our partners, because we accepted long ago that no single institution or ministry of government can win this battle on its own. And we will all have to work together to ensure that in the not too distant future, we can truly say that the Caribbean agricultural sector is really climate resilient or climate proof. I thank you and I look forward to interacting with you over the next few weeks.
Thank you very much, and sorry for that. And it certainly challenges us, all of us, on this webinar, and we hope that our presenters will further charge our participants during this series with what they can do in their little corner of this region to help us to be more safe and be more resilient as the onslaught of the impact of climate change affects us. Okay, so having had all the formal opening of our webinar series, we'll now get down to the meat of the matter, which is to bring to you how we see that we can think about this whole preparation for climate change, and also how we can audit our own entities, environment, to address gaps that might be there that we never thought of before. So to do that, to put it into perspective for you before we launch our 5 weeks, is first Christian Fleming, who is with the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, and he has been since September 2016 engaged by CARDI as the Climate Change and Development Specialist. He works at the intersection of climate change science, food security, and the development of smallholder farmers and rural livelihoods. He's particularly interested in interdisciplinary and participatory methods and approaches to confronting complex issues that result from both the biophysical impacts of climate change and the socio-economic environments in which people exist. So currently, Christian is involved in research seeking to answer the question of how best to design, deliver, and utilize climate information services to support decision-making and innovation among farming communities. Without further ado, I'm going to welcome Mr. Fleming now to present to you the introduction to this webinar series.
Good morning, colleagues, guests. I want to give special thanks to the pilot program for climate resilience for giving us the opportunity to contribute to this webinar series. I believe it's going to be a really productive and insightful one. And as my colleague shared before, our desire and our hope is that there would be some catalytic effect, and that there would be some movement towards resilience, towards true resilience, where we consider the multiple dimensions of that word. And that's what we're really hoping to be able to get across to our audience, as well as to learn as the panelists themselves, so that we are in this fight together and as one comprehensive strategy, all on board, all beating the same tune, so to speak, going forward. In this time, I do want to make room for the other speaker this morning, and in so doing, give me the permission to jump ahead in my presentation. I think Mr. Maxime will do a better job in terms of really speaking to us about the compliance side of things when it comes to climate smart agriculture. In this time, what I'm hoping to do is to give you a sense of CARDI's perspective on climate smart agriculture in the region, providing sort of a timeline in terms of our intervention in this area, and in so doing, highlighting what we believe are some key areas that we need to be considering or have been considering when it comes to climate smart agriculture. At this time, I hope I'll be able to share my screen and jump quickly into a very short presentation. Okay. This is a climate smart agriculture series. We all know this. I'm hoping to be able to give a fair introduction, but again, leaving more of especially the philosophical side of things to Mr. Maxime. At the beginning of this, the climate change discourse, over the last 2 decades or so, a bit more, when we heard this announcement, of this, the anthropogenic side of things, or human contribution to the state of the climate and it's the outlook of that. I believe us here in the region, right through the region, and particularly the agriculture sector, saw our what it means for us, and we were quite aware and raised to the possibilities of the impact. And I know that at CARDI, one of the first questions that came to our mind was, as the Research and Agriculture Research and Development Institute in the region, how are we going to support the region respond to this threat? Some of the key areas that and words that was highlighted and given priority to was the need to enhance our resilience, but doing so in such a way that it doesn't compromise on, at the end of the day, agriculture is about, yes, about food security, nutrition, but it's also about, especially for those who are involved and engaged in the production side of things, it's also in terms of the returns, economic returns. But also taking into account that we need to do so in a way that reduces our footprint. We have allocated amount of resources in the region, and we need to make efficient and effective and wise use of that resource. And the last area that was given priority to is doing that in such a way that it doesn't affect the generations to come, as well as there is continuity to the things that we start and we finish. So when it came to climate smart agriculture, climate resilience, and thinking about those different areas that I mentioned before, one of our key intervention areas to support this initiative was in terms of advocacy. And as my colleague said before, we recognize that this isn't something that we can do alone. So I want to give recognition to the CTA, who has been a early partner to CARDI in terms of advocating our need for developing resilience in the agriculture sector to climate change. So as you see before you, we have had a series of climate change workshops in which the idea was always to bring together climate agriculture practitioners, researchers, policymakers, all to the view of identifying and discussing among ourselves what are those key strategies that we need to be thinking about in key thematic areas if we are to build climate resilience in the sector. And some of those over the years have been protected agriculture, water resource management, the use of plant genetic resources, pest and disease management, and the role of family agriculture in farming. But apart from advocacy, we have had a series of projects that was geared towards, again, responding to the climate smart agricultural agenda. And in the earlies, some of you will remember the CFC funded project that, again, particularly looked at enhancing or identifying protected agriculture and building upon that as a resilience strategy. The 10 TDF, where I single in on what are the varieties or what are the planting materials that we have right through the region that can confer or offer some sort of tolerance and resilience to climate impact. The current project that this series is being funded by and sponsored by the pilot program for climate resilience, and there again more work done in varietal tolerance, looking at how these things stand up to climate impact, drought, flooding in some sense, pests and diseases, crop modeling and simulation. I know in the earlies we've had a lot of work in integrated pest management, recognizing that if we're going to be talking about increasing our resilience to climate change, we can't negate the fact that in a new environment, we could expect different pest incidences, increase of that, as well as the introduction and incidence of new pests that we haven't seen before. And one of the last areas, and that I'm particularly involved in, has to do with the use of climate information and climate services to inform our decisions in the agricultural sector. And how could we leverage that technology to inform our decisions, both in terms of adaptation as well as the mitigation side of things. But again, also important, how could we be productive in an environment that is changing very quickly? Some of our present focus, again, has to do with varietal work, and these are some of the things that we are presently focused on. Again, geared towards enhancing the resilience and climate smart agriculture focus in the region. And we believe that the selection, identifying planting material is one of our key leverage points and strategic areas here in the region, given that we have such a wealth of plant and bioeconomic resources in the region, and many of those are quite highly underutilized. And I want to end with this slide and to just pinpoint again, identify some of the areas that we are currently focusing on. This is where we believe that there are some key leveraging points. The use of controlled environment agriculture, again, resilient planting material, the use of remote sensing to, as my colleague said before, Ansari, to assess our damage, but not just the damage, but also the vulnerability before we have the impact of one of these climate phenomenon, whether it's hurricane, drought, pest and disease, saltwater intrusion. And the last area, the co-development of sectoral bulletins. And for us, that's the agriculture bulletin that is available. And all these things will be made available during this webinar series so that we can be informed. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Christian, for that overview of what it is we're up against and what we see the role of CARDI being, and also to some extent what we see this webinar series to be. Now, next on this ticket for this webinar series is an expert who is known for his involvement in climate change matters, but I will give him a brief introduction nonetheless, Mr. Steve Maxime. Now, Steve Maxime started out his journey, his career journey, as a plant pathologist by training. He's also, the EU recognizes him as a senior expert in climate smart agriculture, and amongst the first agricultural scientists he has been among them addressing climate change concerns during, if we all remember, what we call C-SAC, the Caribbean Planning for Adaptation and to Climate Change, back in 1997. He has conducted training sessions on comprehensive climate smart agriculture for several national, regional, and international organizations. A former UN FAO climate change advisor for the Caribbean, he's currently the science advisor to the Association of Caribbean Media Workers, and he developed the Trademarked Climate Smart Agriculture Compliant, C-SAC for short, training, certification, and auditing tool. And just to say that this tool was what we used to formulate, to set a framework for this webinar series, because we think it basically encompasses what the essence of climate smart agriculture entails. And without treading too much on what he will present to you, I now introduce Steve Maxime to take us through his presentation. Steve, please go ahead.
Very good morning, colleagues. Can I confirm that you are hearing me properly?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Great. And seeing me?
Less importantly, yes.
I was about to mention that. No, but seriously, I want to welcome all of you to this webinar series, and to reiterate that this is going to be a series with a difference, in the sense that far too often we have attempted to address issues in agriculture generally. I mean, whether it be climate change or any other issue. And we tend to stop at the level of information. What I want us to contemplate for this series is that we are going to interrogate the information presented to continue along what is known as the DICAO continuum. You know, you start off with data, you have information. When you interrogate that information, it can become part of your knowledge portfolio. And with that understanding, one expects that you'd make wise decisions. So what we are attempting to do in this series is to provide you with some information that you can interrogate. In other words, you want to ask how and why to some of the bits of information that we'll be presenting over the next couple of weeks. And to be in a position to address climate smart agriculture beyond information. Because I'm sure most of you would agree that information does not solve problems. I mean, I remember in my early days as a field diagnostician, going out to a farmer's field with southern blight, and we drove up in his vehicle, and right alongside his seat was an extension fact sheet on southern blight. And it was of absolutely no use to him. Not that he was illiterate or he couldn't read, it's just that it was just information. And until he interrogated it and it became part of his knowledge system, then it was of very little use. So we're hoping in this series to provide you with the information, and hopefully you will interrogate it with us, and it will become part of your knowledge portfolio. But even more importantly, why are we so consumed with this climate smart agriculture thing? I mean, what prompted it? Well, you heard Christian just now that, you know, okay, so anthropogenic climate change was recognized as an issue. And okay, the FAO came up with a very interesting definition of what climate smart agriculture would entail. But beyond defining it within the narrow confines of what FAO says in terms of, you know, improving the profitability of agriculture, making it more resilient, etc. Why is it that climate smart agriculture is still ignored? And already, I'm seriously ignored in some circles. I'm not telling tales of the school, but the GCF, the Green Climate Fund, I've written a couple of projects, readiness projects for the Green Climate Fund, and I can tell you without fear of, you know, of being, you know, blacklisted or anything, that they're not quite keen on climate smart agriculture. As a matter of fact, I mean, I personally, Naranda and Mahindra both told me that, you know, once they see climate smart agriculture, they just more or less, you know, not necessarily a blind eye, but they're not as interested, because climate smart agriculture has been really defamed, to put it mildly, over the years. Because what comprehensive climate smart agriculture involves is a little more than just these unidimensional projects that keep coming up. I'm sure most of you would have heard of, you know, water harvesting projects. You know, I mean, there's absolutely no such thing as a water harvesting project. Why would you want to harvest water and then continue to use it in the same irresponsible manner as you're using it before any talk about climate change came up? So it became quite clear to me that climate smart agriculture had to be approached in a rather comprehensive way. And these are some of the problems that I encountered over the last 20-something years with countries trying to institute large scale adoption of climate smart agriculture. The very first thing had to do with the inability to articulate what it really means, what it means in a comprehensive sort of way. In other words, it's not only about one activity, it's a suite of activities. Climate smart agriculture is an approach. It is not a one-off thing. Over the years, I've come to realize that it's a lot like safe driving. You know, many people have attended safe driving courses and so on. You have safe driving certification. And you would always meet the one fellow who, because he changed his disc brakes, you know, and he's now using ceramic brakes, and so he's telling you, I'm a safe driver now, you know, because I have new disc brakes, you know. And he still continues to do all the other rubbish that he would have done before, armed with this new knowledge that he's a safe driver because he made 1 or 2 adjustments to his driving habits. He's still using, you know, not dimming his lights at night, and so, you know, so whereas he may not have been in an accident in the last year, he may have caused 15. So I'm saying all this to say that this climate smart agriculture thing that we are going to interrogate over the next 5 weeks involves a range of activities, a suite of activities, and just doing 1 or 2 hodgepodge does not a climate smart agriculture project make. So another thing that struck me over the years is that there has been a suite of greenwashing projects. And I say this again without any fear of intimidation, because I've been around long enough and, you know, I've seen enough to know that there are a number of projects that have been greenwashing projects. And it comes from my background in the environmental sector and in the hotel sector. I used to be a Green Globe consultant. And I know that there are a number of entities, both within the sector and outside of the sector, that harp on these green initiatives, you know, and they just pick and choose some little green initiative there, and then they say, okay, we're going green, and you have a whole greenwashing project. And the example I used earlier with water harvesting is a case in point, in that, you know, why would you want to sponsor someone to do a water harvesting project that may include cutting down a watershed? And this is something we'll take up in the next 5 weeks, but that actually happened. So I'm not making stuff up. And you also have, you know, I was part of that CFC rebirth in terms of CARDI's introduction of root crops and so on, protected agriculture. But if you just institute protected agriculture from a point of view of having a protective surface or a protective structure, and you do not manipulate the other activities, is it really a climate smart agriculture project? Is it really climate smart agriculture if you're still continuing to, you know, disrupt the water cycles and so lower down on the slopes that you're operating from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm saying all of this to say that we are embarking on an activity here that is going to address a number of these weaknesses, if you like, in terms of there's no prioritizing tool against greenwashing. Climate smart agriculture, as currently practiced and promoted, tends to deal primarily with adaptation and not enough with mitigation. And there are a number of reasons for that, which we'll get into in the next 5 weeks, I'm sure. But in terms of the mitigation or the mitigative potential of climate smart agriculture, we have not stressed enough the type of greenhouse gas reduction that you can have with a properly conceived, a properly delivered, a properly evaluated climate smart agriculture project, or the type of biodiversity support that you can claim, the carbon sequestration that you can claim. All of these terms, as I said, will come up as we go through this series. But I just wanted to, you know, as part of the opening here for this cricket match, you know, a younger and brighter Christian opened, you know, and he handled most of the fast bowling, but I'll be in the background there trying to deal with some of the spin bowling that comes later on in the series, where we start looking at actual projects that have purported to be climate smart agriculture, but didn't really come up to scratch. And then what I've found missing in some of the climate smart agriculture projects that I've seen, and I've been lucky enough to see several hundred, is that there's no locally verifiable eco-linked standard, similar to what you would have for like organic production, that certifies or attempts to certify that, look, here is a project or product that has been produced in such a way that we can guarantee, and this is at the level of MRV type guarantees now, where we have monitoring, recording, and verification, which is the type of stuff that the GCF is interested in, the Green Climate Fund is interested in. You heard Christian talking about the funding and Sari talking about the funding of these kinds of projects. And I can tell you, as someone in the forefront writing them, that until we provide the climate finance institutions with the type of MRV documentation that is required, we will not see enough of these agriculture projects being funded under the rubric of climate smart agriculture. So in so saying, we are going to spend the next 5 weeks really interrogating that information so that you leave this series with the knowledge and the understanding to make wise decisions in terms of how you conduct your business in this new climate change era. So with that short interlude, I will pass you back to Dion, and we'll start taking the questions and really interacting and starting to interrogate the information that Christian would have presented earlier. Thank you, Dion.
Okay, thank you, Steve, for that. I hope that everybody was paying keen attention to all of the points you make. I don't think my video is going to come on and stay on. Okay, there it goes. I hope that everybody was thinking about all of that, what you said, and both Christian's introduction as well, to just set our minds around what it is we want to get out of this next few weeks of focus on climate smart agriculture. I deliberately did not entertain questions after Christian spoke because I wanted all our participants to think about the whole of the introduction that was presented today. I also want to take this opportunity to say that tomorrow's session is going to be a continuation of introduction. It is not the same. And so I would want for everybody on the call today to come back tomorrow, same time, same place, different link. Also, I just want to ask you all to be sure to fill out your registration forms. It's very important in terms of our satisfying the requirements of the donors. Please ensure that you fill out the registration form. There's Raina Delancey, who is assisting us here with administering this webinar series, is asking you, please kindly fill that out. So we will now entertain questions. We did promise that this will end at 11:30, and since we have managed the time so well, we do have time for you to ask all you want to ask of our presenters, and if anything of the series itself, so that we can set your mind as to what you can expect of this webinar series. So we're going to open up for questions now. Raise your hand, please, and you will be allowed to speak. And if you have questions that you'd rather type, if you don't have the means to speak, then we have a Q&A box where you can please post your questions there. Don't post it in the chat, because it's harder to pick out questions when you put it in the chat. So that we have the questions clearly visible to us. So please raise your hands now if you have a question for the panelists or on the webinar going forward. Okay, in the chat. So here we Please just say climate smart. No questions? Oh, there's a question in the Q&A box now. Can the presentation be made available? Yes, they will be made available, and also the seminar itself will be up for you to revisit as you need to. Probably just go over and hear some of the points again. Okay. Rajbir, I don't know the pronunciation of Andre's last name, so I'm going to call him Andre. Sorry that you missed the first part, but as I just mentioned, this webinar will be up for future viewing if you missed some of it and you would want to catch up. But please continue with us as we roll out these 5 weeks of webinars.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Harris.
Ragbir. Ragbir is the answer. Okay. Thanks, Andre. Okay, go ahead. Dr. Rankin, you had a question.
Yeah. And I know of a number of persons who probably are thinking of submitting proposals along those lines. Can you give us what are some of the pitfalls that people generally fall in? It would be very useful if you could hear.
Okay, thanks a lot, Dale. One of the things that I've seen, and as I said, I've written 20 grants and been involved in another 2, in that the applications tend to focus primarily on adaptation type activities, let's say. So one may have, again, to beat the old example, you know, something to do with water harvesting and climate smart irrigation technologies, which is really about water management, total picture water management on the farm and what happens to water that leaves the farm as well. But we are yet to be able to include aspects of climate smart agriculture in these projects that deal with carbon sequestration, that deal with greenhouse gas reduction in terms of ruminant feeding practices that can reduce greenhouse gases, the way we deal with waste as a sector, the way we deal with waste, what we consider as waste in agricultural production systems. We have not yet benefited from the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, let's say in waste material on the farm, whether it be peelings or so, anything that we're going to then use into composting. And even when we have projects that include biogas digesters and so from effluent from piggeries and so, we still are not able to leverage, and this is the important point here, to leverage those greenhouse gas reductions as part of the NDCs that these countries are putting out, which is the national contribution, which is really where the focus of the GCF is. Without getting into a lecture mode, the Green Climate Fund was set up so that countries can become more climate smart, literally, right? And as part of your ticket, your introductory ticket into the Green Climate Fund, every country submits what is referred to as a nationally determined contribution. In other words, they have to show the GCF. They have to show the GCF how they are going to be continuously reducing their emissions. And what happens in the majority of countries in the Caribbean is that these nationally determined contributions are in the sectors of transportation and energy, where it's easier and the mechanisms are quite clear, the MRV protocols, where you can actually calculate your greenhouse gas reductions and your emissions control, emissions reduction, etc. Because we are not as yet ready to do that in this sector. And I think the first project that is going to be looking at it is the new Ag-Ready project that is going to be managed by AICA, which is going to be in 6 countries. And you're actually going to have aspects of it looking at how you can promote agriculture as being climate smart to the extent of not only being adaptive, but being mitigative as well. So as I said, you know, that is part of the issue why climate smart agriculture is just taken as, you know, as these one-off adaptive type things, you know, which that just deal with a unidimensional approach, and the Green Climate Fund tends not to be as impressed as other people. I hope that helps, Dale.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I'm seeing a question in the chat from Ms. McPherson about depletion of the ecosystem and how we can promote the pollination of plants. And I know that there's a component that it would address ecosystem management in a changing climate scenario. So Ms. McPherson, the short answer would be that if you keep watching our series in the weeks to come, we will get to that aspect of it in a more fulsome way. But I think Steve will, since Steve is a presenter today, I'll allow him to speak first. Go ahead.
What we have not as yet discussed or addressed is the solution to the problems that I posed earlier, and that to recommend to 5 areas of compliance. So it deals with resource conservation, it deals with biodiversity support, it deals with energy use, it deals with safety, which is something that a number of climate smart agriculture projects tend to ignore, and then it deals with greenhouse gas reduction. So under biodiversity support, there will be questions asked when you use the C-SAC method in terms of what has been done to make sure that you know that your pollinator are available and have not restricted or reduced some of the ecosystem services that your particular plot of land or your particular area would have impacting before decided to embark on this climate smart agriculture project. So I hope that gives a hint into where we're heading with this in terms of biodiversity support, so that in the coming weeks, hope to address all of these. And tomorrow, God willing, when I do my presentation tomorrow, I'm actually going to be going to show you some of the background stuff that goes on with the application of the C-SAC app. I'll use an Excel format to do that. And you see the 20 questions are the basis of this climate smart agriculture compliance, which is what, as Dion said, the series is based on. So I hope that helps.
Okay, Ms. McPherson, you can just indicate if that clarified for you some of the things that can be taken into consideration. We have another question from Ms. Francois. How would climate smart agriculture reach the ground level, that is the farmers? Would our respective Ministry of Agriculture in each country be part of the process? Would there be training for people involved in agriculture? How would the people involved in agriculture in all levels become sensitized to climate smart agriculture? And I would just start by saying that Ms. Francois is going on now. What this webinar recognizes is that although we have initiatives that are addressing climate smart agriculture and relaying it to the farmers who will implement a lot of this climate smart agriculture, it is not necessarily complete, the approaches. And this webinar if we want to be truly climate smart, that is ready to meet the challenges, to become resilient as we face that would be my intervention first, and I will allow Steve or Christian to add further to this. I'll start with Christian. Steve.
Thank you. I believe in being climate smart, and even from the conceptual, one of the ground level, it must for it to be climate smart agriculture. It must interact with them, so that we are considering all dimensions to ensure that the intervention and the practice and the approach is in fact comprehensive. So I am not necessarily sure about the training. I think a lot more of our emphasis need to be about how could we learn, and an aspect of learning as opposed to the traditional sense of training, one person having the knowledge and then passing that down, and expecting application. And I think with the idea of being comprehensive, the approach that is called for more and more is that there is a sense of learning from on all platforms, with everyone involved, and recognizing that one of the terms that Steve kept using is this idea of knowledge and information that is translated into different aspects or different types of knowledge, and therefore recognizing that at multiple several players possess um, a type of knowledge that is relevant to the context, and therefore is really important for us to learn as the different players, so that we could arrive at a solution and interventions that is in fact all comprehensive, context specific, and is in fact meeting the needs of those we are intended to meet, without there being feedback loops, negative feedback loops, or negative or unintended consequences that we hadn't considered before. So I hope I got all of the question to Ms. Francois. Thank you.
Steve, would you like to add anything before I ask Robin to speak?
Yeah, just quickly before Dr. Robin comes in. One of the things that, as I said, I hopefully we'll be able to discuss tomorrow is the 20 questions behind what we see as a comprehensive climate smart agriculture project. There are 20 questions that are asked, and the farmers themselves can answer these questions. And it is by answering those questions or thinking about those questions that one comes to grip with the fact that, I may not be as comprehensive in my approach as I originally thought or as I intended. So I'm suggesting that tomorrow, God willing, when we go over those 20 questions, quickly go over those 20 questions, you will see the breadth of the ecosystem, if you want, the learning ecosystem that is formed when, whether it be a farmer, extension officer, or here in Grenada, there's a that I've interacted with, and they are moving ever so surely towards a more comprehensive appreciation of what climate smart agriculture infers, and it is something that at all levels in the value chain, in the loop value chain, people can interact with the information. So it's not as if it's going to be a training package that has to be tailored for extension officers who will then have to attempt to transfer it to the end users. It is something that can be used from the end user level. So without taking up too much of Greg's time, that would be what I'd want to say about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. I trust that addressed the question thoroughly. And I'll move on to Dr. Robin now to pose his question or make his comment.
My comment is a sort of follow-up to the comments made by Christian and Steve, because, on the ground at the farmer and extension level, there's always this disconnect from what we're talking about here and the 20 questions Steve put up as a sort of a guide for taking us through the comprehensive process. The focus of climate smart at the farm level is almost on productivity. So if a farmer is producing food crops, his interest in all the other factors that makes the process sustainable and comprehensive may not necessarily be there, rightfully or wrongfully so. So you often get a question being asked, what's the difference between GAP, good agricultural practices, and climate smart agriculture? Or is climate smart agriculture an extension? Probably, while I may understand it, but I'd like one of the facilitators to really give a comment on that. The process we're using on the farms and extensions we're working with is certainly not a comprehensive system. And I'm doing some farming now. I think when you see me researchers and technicians are talking at that level, I think we lose that connection with at the farm level, what the focus of the farmer is. This is a guy who's faced with several variables, and he does not have that time to collect any data for you on that, because that requires information, Steve, what we're talking about. He doesn't have the time. Extension doesn't have the time. They're all overworked. And therefore, the focus becomes primarily on the productivity of what commodity is producing. So, and that should serve as a guide for the rest of the sessions. Otherwise, people are not going to get that interest and see what you're talking about. And please, let us get some understanding of GAP, what the farmer's focus is, and how that 5-week session can help. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, Dion, can I?
Yes, by all means.
Okay. There are a number of, I shouldn't say a number, there are a couple of farmers on this webinar series that I've worked with personally on their farms and that they have attempted to use the tool to interact. So I'll leave them subsequently to, if they care to say how easy or how difficult it is to implement at the farm level. But the important thing here, and is we are proposing that is a locally verifiable eco-link quality labeling standard. In other words, there are possibilities that was produced at a particular climate smart agriculture compliant level, and this is not pie in the sky stuff. This is something that we are actually beginning to roll out in terms of how can you have a quality standard associated with the extra effort? Because I agree with Greg, it is extra effort. It is extra effort. It is an extra dimension of all the other concerns you're balancing. Why should I worry if this is climate smart or not? Once I get a proper price from a produce, that should be the be all and end all. But I'm saying that it is now being linked to that. So not only in terms of the types of the quality standards that hotels are implementing, right? And as I said, this is not telling tales out of school, but this has to do with ongoing projects right now, so that there is a complied, the banana farmers complied because it was linked to the returns. And just like any other type of quality auditing system, whether it be GAP or C-SAC or fair trade, once you can link it to preferential pricing, after all of this trouble to produce something in a climate smart way, it still goes up being sold at the same price as however arbitrarily produced otherwise, then clearly there will be no emphasis. And the people who locals and is prepared to pay for the difference. So I'm saying that, Greg, I hope one of the farmers that I've been working with might come up and say something today, or maybe during the course of the 5 weeks, we'll be able to show how, how it makes a difference. Because a certification scheme is only as good as the increased revenue it could certify, to be quite honest.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, I just want to put in one sentence in that to say that being climate smart is not just about what is in it in terms of economic benefit, but some of it is just a matter of survival. If you do not cover all the bases, you might be really exposed. And so you want to ensure that you are doing all within your power to protect your efforts from some of the vagaries of this changing and often harsh effects of climate change. So that's part of the benefit as well, that we hope to empower the farmers to be able to see the exposures of their systems and intervene early so that they are resilient. So Mr. Gooding did ask Steve if you could give an example of what proper rainwater harvesting is. There are a couple of other questions that come up, but if you could respond to that very quickly, and
yes,
so
yes.
I can go
Can I
on.
respond to that by asking Mr. Gooding, who is one of the farmers that I work with, why he prompted that question and why he doesn't say how he has benefited from the use of C-SAC? I'm throwing the question back to Mr. Gooding, who is one of the
I think he wants you to put him up as an example of what it is. So.
Exactly. I suspect so. I
So
suspect
please spend a minute and do that so we know about what is done.
Okay, so Evans, you want to take over here, please? As the Queen Medal recipient for grader for this year, champion farmer. Please, Mr. Gooding.
I don't know that Mr. Gooding wants to blow his trumpet, so if you would just help him.
Well, what I can say is that Evans, Mr. Gooding, is one of the farmers in Grenada who, if you ever mention irrigation next to him, his first reaction is, you mean water management, right? Because irrigation is about the application of water, but if you're not sure where that water is going and how much of it you need and all that,
You were hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you. Go ahead.
I was having problems with my mic.
Go ahead, Mr. Gooding, we're hearing you.
I was having problems with my mic. Yes, I really want to ask, because Steve seems to be that what we're doing now and considers rainwater harvesting, there should be some corrective ways. So I will ask him to just to explain what is that we're missing in terms of rainwater harvesting. And while I'm on the floor, I will also ask him if sometime in the future, what we'll be looking at C-SAC, if he will have a session specifically to be explaining to the farmers what the steps in C-SAC is, because one of the areas I'm having some difficulties in looking at when you talk in terms of the reduction of greenhouse gas. in how would that fit into the C-SAC project. And the area, again, you talk in terms of energy use. So I hope that sometime in the future we'll have a session specifically dealing with C-SAC. So some of the questions and examples that we have, we could really spend some time on that, because from what I've seen, just let me say this. In agriculture today, I've seen looking at agriculture as a car. You know, most persons who buy a car, they want a car, they want the use of the car, go from point A to point B, and they drive. But when it comes to the functioning of the car, when it comes to, as you people will say, to the nitty-gritty of the car, they have no example. They have no idea what really is taken in the car, in the operation of the car. And I see agriculture something like that. Everybody wants to come into agriculture, but don't have a clue how really the technology and involving agriculture really is all about. And I see a number of webcams and Zoom meetings going about in terms of soil and soil management. And that's what I really like, is that people are coming down to where the engine of the car is, looking at the function of the car, and just buying a car and driving a car just for the use of the car. I just wanted to say that. And if Steve would want to say something on rainwater harvesting, I'll be fine.
So, sorry to have this as an internal grader staff meeting, a NIFO staff meeting. Sorry, but what I was commenting on is the fact that I am not impressed when somebody says they have a water harvesting project, because until I see what you're going to be doing with that water that you allegedly harvested, I am not impressed. Because I have seen, and Evans can back me up on this too, where people have instituted these so-called water harvesting projects only to continue wasting the water that was so expensively, sorry to use that term, expensively harvested, and go ahead and use it in the same way that they would have done with the water from the district supply or from some easily accessible river. So that's the context in which I was talking about water harvesting, and Evans knows that. And that if we keep concentrating on sort of, you know, this glorified terminology, and we don't get into the nitty-gritty, as he said, we will always be in trouble coming up with projects that are boasting that you just harvested, you know, so many gallons of water, and then we proceeded to waste it in the same way that we were doing before we started talking about climate smart operations. So it's in that context. But as I said, when Dr. Simpson and Drs. Lindsay and so talk about irrigation management, we will have a chance to talk about that in more detail. Thanks.
And yeah, that's what I mean. If you look again, Steve, if you look, as I said again, I don't know why this team is as way of seeing agriculture. Someone buy a car, someone here about rainwater harvesting, and they really want to do rainwater harvesting. Yeah. But how do
not knowing why?
Say it.
Okay, I'm going to just write on that last part of the answer. Thank you, Mr. Gooding. Thank you. It's always good to have the testimonial of the persons who are actually doing the stuff on the ground. And so I thank you very much for your intervention. As the course goes on, as was mentioned, there will be a full session on matters of water management and irrigation management. So please join us again. And there was a question involved in earlier, I'm not seeing it right now, but I know there was a question as to whether or not we were going to have different things each day in the webinar series. Yes, we have different topics as the weeks progress. In fact, as the sessions progress, we have 2 days per week, this day and one other, which is tomorrow. We're going Tuesday, Wednesday every week for the next 5 weeks. So we've been doing introduction to climate smart agriculture today, and we will do further introduction tomorrow. We have soil and water management. We have irrigation management, which will give you some examples. We look at specific cropping systems and how to climate smart them so that you have an idea of the application of some of what we're talking about. So we're going to look at roots and tuber crops, hot pepper and vegetables. And we're going to also be looking at post-harvest production technology, and integrated pest management and risk management. So that's to give you and to entice you to stay tuned and stay with us as we take you through this, because from that list, you can now appreciate how wide this thing is if you want to really be climate smart in agriculture. And so we hope to be able to share with you stuff that you can go back and use to look at your own systems and decide what you can implement now and plan for those that you can't implement right away. Ms. Laudat and Mr. Shoup have questions, and so I'm going to just quickly speak to them so we can address them live. So Ms. Laudat, you were first. So how do small producers better lobby with financial agencies to improve sustainable financing mechanisms to support sustainable agriculture practices? That's part one. Please note that question. And then the second part, is there an opportunity for crowdfinancing and microfinancing? How do governments set better policies to enable the environment for financing of, and I think, of such? It might be the last word there. So I want Christian to just turn on his video if he wants to intervene to any of these questions. But Steve, whilst your mic is open, could you just?
Yeah, thanks, Julian. Let me tackle the second question first. In terms of how these climate smart type projects can be financed, let's say locally, or without going to the larger green and climate finance agencies. I can tell you about some examples out of Trinidad and possibly Grenada, in terms of, there are some credit unions now that are become more aware of sustainable practices. Let's leave climate smart agriculture out, as an overall rubric, but more sustainable practices, and that there are specific packages being tailored. I, as someone who has been asked to advise the ADB in Trinidad over the last couple of years, I know that they are drifting towards more sustainably sound, eco-friendly, climate smart agriculture type applications. I was asked to review their protective agriculture mechanisms. So I know that there are opportunities for microfinancing, which is what it boils down to, microfinancing for climate smart agriculture. So Julian, that would be the first part of the question. The other thing is that on a wider scale, on a national level, most governments are looking towards first readiness grants from the GCF, and then subsequently properly prepared concept notes and projects that come out of the project financing pipeline of the GCF to really fund significant climate smart agriculture type projects. This is not going to be at the level of the individual small farmer. So those are the two areas. I would think a more enlightened, more sensitive, more agri savvy credit union, as has happened in some cases in Trinidad, and at the other end, a more involved government that has a relationship with its NDA. The NDA is the National Designated Authority of the GCF, and that person or office is really the stopgap at the pipeline of projects that can be funded. So I would think those would be the two areas, Julian. Sorry, Christian, I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, only a small contribution to that, and that's particularly to the first part of the question. I think one of the things we've recognized working with donors, with funders, is that in many cases, if not most cases, they're very keen on working with not a single individual, but a group, whether it's at the community level, particular watershed, or just on some particular key priority area. So I think that's one of a key strategy as well. Just to organize ourselves. Maybe I want to be careful about that with organizing, but recognizing the power in working together, and sharing, especially where you share concerns together. For the case of financing, we know that forming groups, it is a lot to maintain groups, to form groups, and to sustain groups. But the donors would require that there is some level of formation and participatory approach towards funding. The one other area that I thought of is the Jeff Small Grants program, which I've seen in my experience that they've very keen on financing small producers, and again, especially where there's a group structure in place. So that would be my contributions to especially the first part of the question.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. Julian, I forgot that part in there. Jeff Small Grants definitely would be a mechanism, and there's also a readiness grant, a current readiness grant in operation that's being managed by Canary, and what that grant has included is a mechanism to empower CSOs, civil society organizations, to be able to write the type of funding proposals that we are talking about when I was referring to the government side. So those will be two avenues for small farmers, individual and groups, to access funding through Jeff, enlightened community type financing organizations like credit unions, and through an amalgamated arrangement through Canary, where the more enlightened and better prepared farmers organizations and so can approach the GCF directly for funding. Thanks.
Okay, I don't want us to, having done a great job with the time, not address all the questions. So we do have another two-part question by Mr. Shrew. We are many small island countries. Is there a non-governmental platform or mixed platform, government and NGO, where all the Caribbean collaborate? Because it's a farm level, we execute the plan, but if organizations don't have a clue nor a plan, it's a waste of energy. So will there be labeling? And you did address the labeling in part when you responded to Greg's comment. So do you have anything to add to that for Mr. Shrew and the first part of his question, to just talk about some of what happens regionally for this?
Again, I wouldn't want to overstep my boundaries here as someone dealing with CSOs, but I know that there are a number of amalgamations, if you like, of farmers organizations throughout the region. Sorry to put my good friend, who's the president of NIFO, on the spot, but there's a Northeast Farmers Organization. I'm sure Mr. Gooding, as president of that organization, would have a better insight into that question than I would. So Evans, could you please?
Steve, I didn't get the full, I didn't hear him clearly. Just give me an overview of what he just said. Steve?
Yeah, could you repeat the question, please?
Okay, well, the person was asking one on a regional level, so I would expect that Christian will speak on what are some of those entities on the regional level looking at climate matters. But Mr. Gooding, it's the platform on which you can collaborate to look at some of these issues when it comes to climate smart agriculture, building the resilience and so on, how we collaborate to make this happen. And but at the farm level, I'm just trying to read in the middle of the sentence in the question. At the farm level, we execute the plan, but if the government, sorry, this text keeps moving on me. We execute the plan, but the organizations don't have a clue, nor a plan. It's a waste of energy. So will there be labeling? That's the second part. So I don't know which side you wanted Mr. Gooding's intervention, Steve.
I thought the question asked whether there was a regional mechanism or arrangement between farmers. Sorry, my mistake.
Okay.
I misread the question. Sorry, but
okay.
I think it might be, Christian might be better placed.
Right, so Christian, if you would just speak on the regional platforms.
I want to believe there are a couple that came to my mind. There is the food and nutrition cluster that CARDI sits on, as well as several other non-governmental agencies that you spoke to. But also, at the end of the day, these clusters and these platforms were set up to serve our member states and our governments across the region. The intention is when we meet is that we do share expertise in different key areas that we bring together on the table towards informing our governments across the region. The link between to the farm level isn't necessarily, platforms or mixed platforms is one approach, and certainly, but there are numerous ways perhaps we could ensure, because I suppose the question is really a matter of how do we get the concerns that are from the farm level up into top level, high level decision making, and in that regard, we are seeing more and more where there is a call and concern for more participatory type approaches or bottom-up client-led approaches, which is one of the pillars in which we stand on at CARDI. And I think is in doing that and doing that better and doing that more, in which we can get, yes, the planning at multiple scales, because yes, I believe plans at all level integrated is the ideal scenario or the case that we want. We want that the policies that we do have at the government level that was informed, whether it's research, data, information, but then now we also have the plans or the concerns at the farm level feeding into the information and data that was collected. I could think about the other platforms that come to my mind is those around commodities of concerns. We've had livestock and crop crop type platforms through the region over the years. Networks around the sharing of plant genetic resources, that the idea again is to have information moving back and forth from the farmer to the farm level, to the institutional regional level. I'm not sure about the labeling part. I'm hoping to leave that part for Steve to mention, but I also think that perhaps I know that I probably want to call on Greg here, who could probably mention a couple of these other platforms or have a bit more knowledge on them that he might be able to share.
Okay, I don't know if Greg is still on. Certainly though, we do work with farmers groups a lot when we approach our projects in CARDI. I think of the coconut project that is being done on the regional level. We have in that a concept where we have alliances of farmers within different geographic regions growing coconuts, and we meet with them. We look at all the concerns, not just those that are relevant to climate, and general risk management and mitigation of any adverse effects that any threats that are posed there. And then we, as you say, we channel all of this up through the process of addressing priority concerns in among these various farmers groups. And so, yes would be the short answer to the question as to whether or not we have this sort of collaboration. Certainly more and more collaboration is being seen across many agencies as necessary as we seek to leverage and to conserve our funding and to make sure that we are not duplicating our efforts to address any one thing in the region. So I would say, yes, we do have that, Mr. Shu, and it will get increasingly so because we need to optimize the use of the resources available to us as agencies. I don't see any other questions. So I think we are now.
I think we had a question.
You seeing another question?
Perhaps in the chat.
In the chat, okay. I'm looking in the Q&A box. There's my first. Let me see. This topic is really a good topic. However, do CARDI in farmers and schools, passing and injuries. Okay, you're asking if we are in close relationship with farmers. And I gave an example just a while ago of the coconut, our work in coconut, where we actually are intimately involved with the farmers in the project areas. And that is our approach generally. We have been doing participatory research for a long time now in all the commodities that we have responsibilities for, including livestock. There was a question on livestock and whether we would address it. I will just take the opportunity to say we are going to address it. It was not top on the agenda because our multidisciplinary team did not have a livestock person in there, but since your question, we have identified such and we will include it. So stay tuned for that session on the livestock in terms of climate smart agriculture. I am looking for the name. I am trying David, I hope that I answered the question there. No, it wasn't David who asked that question. But I hope the question was answered about how do we, if we have a close relationship with small farmers. Yes, we do have a close relationship with small farmers, not just in climate smart matters, but in all matters. I am making sure that I am not leaving out anybody. Aquatic, oh boy, no. You're really putting me on the spot. I don't know if we can, in a hurry, find that and introduce some farming. Just to say that within this project, that the PPCR, there is a farming aspect to it as well. Okay. And I'm seeing a response from Mr. Shu as well to my last intervention. All right. Okay, Mr. Shu. So when you make that intervention, I will address that. But Miss Suzanne McLennan Miguel, I don't know that I can answer you today, but stay tuned and we will see if we can ask one of our presenters to incorporate fish farming into any of the presentations. Okay, any other questions? Integrated farming with rice and fishing. Okay, you're adding to that. And we will carry this forward in our discussions after when we reconvene to discuss this webinar today. Miss Suzanne, if that would be helpful to you. We will discuss this after. I can't on my feet respond to whether we can introduce. Integrated farming is what Susan is saying, with rice and fishing is what she would like to hear about. Well, the chats are coming up so fast and furious, I'm not keeping up with them. And one just came up and disappeared. This topic is really good. Okay, I did read that already. All right, I don't want to lose the time and to, boy, I'm not seeing that last question. Mr. Nancy, can you help me? Are we finding?
So do you request feedback to local farmers and get involved?
Okay, that's a question on impact assessment. We don't always go in to do our impact assessment as we should, but more and more in our approach, we are incorporating that. And so that's the answer to the question as to whether we get feedback from our farmers. Why the chats are going too fast for me to. Okay, I see something about a puntia.
The issue of composing.
Compost?
Composing.
All right, so before I start to wade into waters that have to do with our subsequent webinar sessions, I just will repeat for you that going forward, we're gonna have further introduction to climate smart agriculture. We're gonna have presentations on soil and water management, irrigation management, cropping systems, specifically root and tuber crops, hot pepper and vegetables, post-harvest production technology, integrated pest management, and risk management. And based on today's intervention, we're going to try and insert there a livestock presentation on climate smart agriculture for livestock. So I'm hoping, please, we'll try to get back to you from your registration, anything that we missed in today's session. But I don't want to overindulge all who are still on the call by stretching this out beyond the specified time. So thank you all. We had a very robust discussion today. It is really encouraging for the days and weeks to come. And we do hope that you will come back and participate as you have today, and that more importantly, you will leave better equipped to face some of what you have to deal with in your various segments of the value chain when it comes to matters relating to climate change. Our presenters, if you have any last word to say at this point in time, please do so now, starting with Christian.
Ms. Harris, before you go to your panelists, I had my hands raised, but maybe you didn't notice my raised hand.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to look at all the various screens that pop up on my. Go ahead, please.
One thing I would like to see going forward is to work with somebody, the institution of learning. Because at Northeast Farmers Organization, we do a project through Jeff in terms of solar energy. And we didn't have the resources for the panel to drive the pumps. And the coordinator at Jeff was able to link us with TAMCC, which is an institution of learning. And what we had to do was give TAMCC access to the irrigation, the water management system yes, if you're listening, Steve, where we give TAMC access to the system, and they could actually in the future use it as a learning system for their students. They purchase the solar panel for us because we don't have anybody within our group know about solar panel. So we had a joint venture with TAMCC where we have the irrigation system our farm, but they installing the solar panel which will drive the solar. We're using solar pump. So they have access to that anytime they have students who want to go in the field and do any kind of learning exercise. And I think it was a really welcome joint venture. We could learn from TAMCC as a learning institution, and TAMCC could learn from us in the farming industry. Again, it doesn't necessarily. I don't see it as remaining only with that project, but mere fact that these two institutions could come together, I could see that we could endeavor into future projects between these two institutions, NIFO and TAMCC. And Mr. Maxime is aware of what we're doing because I normally consult with him in terms of projects like that. I just wanted to say that.
Okay, thank you for that. We definitely look at various ways to collaborate both on farm and interinstitutionally. So that example is a good one, and we will bear that in mind as well. Thank you, Mr. Gooding, for all of your interventions today. Somebody is saying the audio is too low. I don't know. Oh, okay. It was from the last speaker. All right. So, Christian, you're on now, please.
Thank you, Dion. My closing remarks are really short. I trust that today the session would have, really interest our participants, as well as for us, the panelists, just hearing the concerns and the questions that was raised. But perhaps more importantly, that it creates an open room for us to, as the last speaker actually mentioned, to be able to, all right, step out from here and to see that this is, again, not another talk session, not another something that we attended and go to the side, but that there is momentum and that there is room in which we can move ahead in terms of implementing some of these this holistic approach and using this as a stepping stone to putting some things into practice. So I look forward to the rest of the sessions and wish you all the best. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Christian. Steve, would you like to now speak?
Just a very general thank you to all the participants, all the attendees, and to hope to see or hear them tomorrow. Thanks.
Great. I'd like to echo that sentiment that we wish to see you all back here tomorrow, same time. I'm having problems with the video. Same time as we continue this series. I hope that you have been encouraged by today's exercise to join us again. And with each end of each one, we will introduce you to what comes next. So tomorrow, we will go into some further introductions so that we lay a good foundation before we start to build on with some of the applications and the experiences in the various aspects to be considered in this very interesting topic of climate smart agriculture. Thank you very much. And I do look forward to seeing you tomorrow as my friend and colleague, Dr. Greg Robin will moderate tomorrow's session. And our presenters, Christian Fleming and Steve Maxime, will return to share with you more on their experiences. Thank you all and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.